Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for, with a couple notes from Tuesday that I think are worth discussing. The first one, it involves a player that we have talked about a ton here on the Aaron Torres pod this spring, player by the name of DJ Wagner. Think everybody knows the background by now, but DJ Wagner, of course, played this past year at Kentucky, was at one point the #1 rated high school player in the class of 2023. You know, senior year's good, but not great. Goes to Kentucky, was very good early. Then he gets hurt. Then he comes back. Then Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham are kind of doing their things. He's still the starter, but other guys are playing better. Just a strange season for DJ Wagner. And so the season ends, Calipari leaves, and DJ Wagner announces that he's going to enter the transfer portal. And I said at the time, and I truly believe it, I said, I think this guy is better than people are giving him credit for. I know it didn't go great at Kentucky, but if you look how he played early, 14 points against Carolina, 14 points in an SEC opening win against Florida. This is a talented player, was the odd man out to his credit, as I keep saying. One, when he was healthy, he was really good. But two, when he came back and it was super clear and super obvious that he was not the best back player in the backcourt, I thought he took it all in stride, was a good teammate. I talked to some people around Kentucky around that time. They said he's being a perfect teammate. Like, one thing I'll say about the Kentucky team from this past year, all those guys, everybody fell in line, and it was about the good of the team rather than themselves. So I bring it all up because when Cal leaves, DJ Wagner enters the transfer portal. The NBA draft deadline passes last week. His name isn't on the early entry list, so we know he's coming back to college. And I think we got an answer as to where he's going to go next, as on Tuesday afternoon, John Rothstein, CBS Sports, does put out a tweet that DJ Wagner will visit Arkansas this weekend. I've said from the beginning, I always believed this was going to be his landing spot. And while it's not official yet, I think it will be very shortly. First off, in terms of DJ, listen, I just said it. I won't repeat it. But I don't think there's a player that got a worse rap this year. And I get it. If you're comparing him to a guy that was ranked at one point the #1 player in the country, and you're expecting the traditional what a #1 lead guard in America looks like, no, he wasn't John Wall. He wasn't Derrick Rose. He wasn't Anthony Black at Arkansas a year ago. But what he was, I thought, was a very good freshman in college basketball. Not everybody's a one and done. Not everybody is a first-team All-American as a freshman. Most guys aren't. But he averaged 9 points, 3.5 assists per game. The shooting needs to be better. He'd be the first person to tell you that. But I think the confidence waned back and forth as the ebbs and flows of the season went. Early on was very good. Early on was confident. As I said, 14 points against Carolina. They turned out to be pretty good. 14 points against Florida turned out to be pretty good. Then the season goes on. You're injured. Other guys step up. I think there was some public pressure to play Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham. And in the end, the season didn't end how you wanted. But you're now in the portal. And as I've said from the beginning, I've always thought that it made sense for Arkansas, although other schools have been involved. You know, I didn't see, DJ did visit USC last week. Eric Musselman is obviously the coach there. I saw Adam Zagoria put out a report that he's expected to visit Florida. They do need another guard, but it's going to be Arkansas. Or listen, I don't want to say that because I'm not 100% certain, but I feel pretty, you know, to use the Larry David, I feel pretty good that it is going to be the Arkansas Razorbacks. By the way, if DJ Wagner takes a free trip to LA and a free trip to Florida in the process of going where everybody thinks he is, then shout out to him, because that is ultimately gaming the system. But I believe he's going to be Arkansas, and it's for all the reasons we already know. It's because of basically a relationship with John Calipari and Kenny Payne, essentially since the day he was born, right? We all know the background with John Calipari and his father. DeJuan Wagner was the original one-and-done Kentucky recruit, or Calipari recruit, excuse me. Played 1 year at Memphis. The famous story, came into Calipari's office. Calipari rips up his scholarship and basically says, you got to get the heck out of here. I'm not letting you come back. And thankfully, it all worked out that way because obviously he had some very serious medical issues early in his career in the NBA and wasn't able to play for very long. If you go back and watch the Calipari documentary on ESPN, DeJuan Wagner's basically like, this dude saved my life. Because if I'd come back for another year or two, this wasn't the NIL era. I wasn't making money. And I would have lost out on any earning opportunity if I had come back and Calipari wouldn't have let me. So the relationship has been there. It's worth noting that Kenny Payne, of course, played with DJ Wagner's grandfather, Milt Wagner, at Louisville. Kenny Payne is now the lead assistant coach. I think this is a matter of if not when this happens. As I said, he's visiting next week, and I think it'll be done probably by Monday or Tuesday. The one thing I have noticed about Cal with all these kids, it doesn't feel like kids are committing on their trips. You know, a lot of these coaches, you know, they just want the commitment in the here and now. I think because they're afraid to lose them. You know, Calipari has his fingers on the pulse of everything, right? You know, John L. Davis takes a trip and commits 3 or 4 days later. Boogie Flan commits 2-3 days after his trip. Carter Knox commits 2 or 3 days after his trip. Adu Thiero visited middle of last week, and everyone's sitting there saying, what's going on? Is he going to be there? What does it mean? Da-da-da-da, this and that. And he commits to Arkansas just a day or so ago. So I believe DJ Wagner will be an Arkansas Razorback. And let me say this. When that happens, I think you're talking about a missing piece for this team. There's still a little bit more work to be done, but I think you're talking about probably about a top 10 roster in all of college basketball, okay? So I updated my too early top 25 on Tuesday. I actually did it twice. Did it in the morning, then Kadari Richmond committed to St. John's, updated it again. And so I only bring it up because I now have Arkansas very comfortably in the top 15. With Adu Thiero, I think he's the 4-man there. You know, we didn't talk, by the way, I did an Adu Thiero reaction on Monday on the Aaron Torres YouTube channel. So if you missed that, make sure to go back and check it out. But Adu Thiero is probably going to be the 4. Jonas Adu is probably going to be the 5. Carter Knox, the McDonald's All-American freshman, will probably be the 3. I think if you want to go small, you can play Boogie Flan there. And then why I think this works out so well. DJ Wagner at the 1 now allows John L. Davis to play off the ball. To me, that's important. John L. Davis can play on the ball. I think he's the best version of himself is when he's off the ball, because it's almost like what happened with Reed Sheppard this past year at Kentucky. When you have Reed Sheppard on the ball, it takes away from his ability to score off the ball, and it's the same with John L. Davis. So you bring in DJ Wagner. He's your starter at the 1. John L. Davis is your starter at the 2. You can go big or small at 3, Adu at the 4, and Adu at the 5. That's going to get confusing. Then you got either Boogie Flan, Carter Knox off the bench. You got Billy Richmond off the bench. You got Big Z off the bench. I'm here to tell you that is a really, 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 really good team going into next year. Now, a couple things. One, we'll see what Cal does from here. First off, I would still say probably need a little bit more shooting. I know the Chaz Lanier kid who's been in the portal. A lot of people are talking about him. The Pryor kid, I've heard a little bit of buzz on Kason Pryor. He's kind of a stretch 4, stretch 5, played at South Florida this past year, 35% three-point shooter. He'd be kind of a nice little piece at the 4 that you could play alongside Big Z at the 5, Jonas Adu at the 5. So you're starting to hear names, but I think you're probably 1 or 2 pieces away from, I think, having a really good team. Now you're at 8, and this is the issue with Cal. You don't want to over-recruit because you don't want to have a locker room full of guys that aren't happy, that are coming somewhere, that were promised something, that aren't happy with where they're at. But the one thing about Cal, guys generally fall in line. As I said, last year at Kentucky, there were a lot of McDonald's All-Americans, a lot of 5-stars on the bench, not playing as much as they wanted, and they all fell in line. Rob Dillingham, Reed Sheppard came off the bench. They're going to be lottery picks. Aaron Bradshaw, DJ Wagner were top 5 players in last year's high school class and basically accepted a smaller role. So we'll see what happens, but I think DJ Wagner is going to end up an Arkansas Razorback, and when he does, I think you're talking about a really, really good team. A starting 5 of DJ Wagner, John L. Davis, Carter Knox, Adu Thiero, and Jonas Adu. That's like top 10 in America type stuff with Billy Richmond, with Boogie Fland, with Big Z off the bench. Now, again, you got to fill it out. That'll be 8 players. You have to find the right pieces. You have to find guys that will play a role. You have to put together a team, John Calipari, not just your best talent. But even with that, I would say, I think Calipari gets a bad rap. You got to remember last year at this time, he had 2 big men that were super banged up, didn't know when they would be back. Aaron Bradshaw, and also on top of that, Agana and Yenso both got hurt last summer. So then you got to bring in Trey Mitchell. Then you got to bring in Big Z. And there was just never a way to get everybody on the same page. But you probably need at least 3 more guys because ultimately, right, first of all, you need 10 to play 5-on-5 in practice. But also, I think he eventually gets to 11. But you add DJ Wagner to this mix, I think you have a potential. I don't know that I can say top 10 team because there's a lot of really good teams with, UConn and Alabama and Kansas and Arizona and Iowa State and Baylor. But they're in the short conversation. They'll be as good as anybody in the SEC outside of, maybe in Alabama or so. But that is going to be a really, 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 really good team.